The Bike Club podcast is a collaboration between Beth Curran and Akshaya Parthasarathy.
The Bike Club podcast acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land we record on. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging.
Welcome to Bike Club, a tech podcast crafted by the girls for the girls. Our mission to elevate, educate, and explore the exciting world of technology.
So tune in and remember, the first rule of Bike Club is to talk about Bike Club.
Hello everyone, this is Akshaya with another episode of Bike Club. How are you going, Beth?
I'm going well. How are you? I'm pretty tired, but other than that, I'm going well.
Yeah, it has been quite the long week. I think it was like Monday for about 3 days.
Yeah.
It felt like one of those, yeah. Before we even jump into the rule, just as like a little bit of a teaser for what this episode contains, because I'm very excited about today's. What is the first thing that comes to your mind when somebody says social media, or rather, who comes to your mind when somebody says social media?
Oh, that's hard. I mean, I'm thinking of just like influencers in general. I'm not really thinking of like a specific person. And then my brain went to like Mark Zuckerberg.
Exactly. Well, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
You're pretty bang on. Well, imagine my surprise when the name that should have come up when we think of social media is actually a woman.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. But before I tell you all about that, do you want to give us the rule for this week?
Yes. So my Bike Club rule for this week is going to be we build intentional communities with women around us. I think that in tech workspaces, but even in like generally in all corporate workspaces, I think it's really important to kind of intentionally dig into building a space with the other women around you because we have the opportunity to really support each other and lift each other up. And
Yep.
like at our workplace, we have a little group chat with all the girls in the office, and it
Which
can
is
be a
very
good place to
essential.
like,
Yeah. If you just
it
want to
can be a
rant
good
it
place
out,
to
just that
vent,
assurance.
get
No, I
help.
get you. Yeah.
For
I like
sure.
that. It's also very important because I feel like I don't know how it was for you, but a good part of my culture and just background thrives on competition. Like you're constantly
Yeah.
compared to the neighbor's kid, that kind of a so
Yeah.
you're essentially just grown up thinking each to his own, that kind of mentality, which kind of drives you to look at everybody as competition. And when we look at STEM, I mean, we already know the statistics of the workplace and the number of women that occupy it. It
Yeah.
makes no sense to be in competition with one another when we could just be encouraging one another. So I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's room for everyone. And
Yes.
yeah, we need to support each other.
Well, thanks, Beth. That was a really good rule. Now back to unraveling the face behind social network, or rather, not so
Yeah,
much,
I'm
but
excited. I
yeah.
have no idea who this is. Yeah.
Okay. But before I even get to that, I just want to tell you like a little something that I read about, like the earliest of web pages, or basically around when, the .com was introduced. So earliest web technologies, I couldn't imagine them. They must have just been very lonely, right? Because it's just a static web page presented to you. There's not much evolving information as we have today. And for example, when you're scrolling through Instagram, let's say you click on a single video, or just like a picture of maybe food or just travel, and then automatically the next couple of posts that get recommended to you evolve based on that first click that you had. So these are dynamic elements to a web page, as opposed to static. So static web pages are just like it's content. The content has just been presented to you, and they're like, yeah, here you go. This is all that you get. An exception was brought to this, however, sometime in the early, I think, 1990s. Yeah, 90s. And there was a website called Homer, kind of like The Simpsons, or HOMR, which is the short form for Helpful Online Music Recommendation. And it was one of the earliest projects that emerged out of the MIT lab of a Belgian born computer scientist called Pattie Maes. So Pattie kind of shares, I found that a good amount of similarity with our previous Woman in Spotlight, Radia, in the sense that both of them were not interested in just breaking things or taking things apart. I was reading an article where her mum was actually quoted saying about how much she loved taking care of animals, and she used to bring in stray cats, stray dogs, and just wanted to treat
Oh.
them. Yeah, so she never really thought about technology, but she was more inclined to becoming a vet. But eventually she moved to pursue a bachelor's degree and then a PhD in computer science. And once again, this is not because of, just like a sudden epiphany that she touched code and she was like, yeah, this is what I'm meant to do. She was quite straightforward about it. She's like, I think they were around, it was around the 70s or the 80s. And there
Yeah.
wasn't much scope in Europe for people who pursued science or like biology or architecture, which was another field. And she's like, I just wanted to make money. And she's like, okay, this
Yeah,
is where.
fair enough.
Yeah, so that's what just led her to like pursue it. But then even while doing her bachelor's, I think it was sometime around her third year when the fascination taking computer science as a job grew into something bigger, because she had her first artificial intelligence class. And she was learning about these
Mm.
things, learning about all these different concepts, about how useful computers can be to humans. The more research that she did on it, she ended up looking up on an MIT artificial intelligence lab that was doing some really significant work in the field of AI. So she applied for it, and she then got accepted into this into the extended AI lab of 40 people, and she was the only
Mhm.
woman who was accepted into that.
Yeah.
And I think it was
What year was this? Sorry.
I think we're looking at like 19 somewhere in the mid 1980s.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
AI
so
was
very
already,
early days.
I know, yeah, very, very early days of AI. People were just experimenting with it. But yeah, so I mean, it was already pretty rare to be on the cusp of something so brand
Mm.
new, and then even more rarer to be the only woman in a lab of like 40 people. I think they had something, even though it was late 80s, early 90s. AI was more towards research rather than the practical usage of it, which
Mm.
makes sense because like we're only just seeing the actual practical usage of it. And that research period of artificial intelligence, they used to call it as an AI winter, simply because of where it was just this long stretch, like quite literally nothing happening apart from the early hype of it. So it was hyped up,
Yeah.
it was brought in brand new around 60s or 70s, and then after that people didn't know what to do with it. They were just like, okay, yeah, this exists. It's it tells us new things, or it was just
Mm.
creating intelligent systems, or it basically did act in a way a human would do. Patty, at this time, she saw what the capabilities of AI would be. She thought AI could actually be used to help us with our decisions, our choices, and just our day to day life. And this was around the time that she started working with something called agents. And she created a group within that lab called the Software Agents Group. So, just to clarify, an agent is a software program that can interact with its environment, collect data, and then use that to perform a task that would have certain goals. This is one of I would say like the basic building block whenever you're trying to learn artificial intelligence. So a good example of this is the chess game on our laptops, which just comes pre-installed.
Yep.
So you know how you play versus computer. So the computer is
Yep.
basically the computer agent, or the chess agent is built in with certain goals that, yeah, if a user makes this move, then you'll have to make that move in order to overcome them, and then ultimately your bigger goal is to win the game. So that's like the bare example of an agent. And she started working around these agents, just toying with them. There's a lot of, I would say, machine learning involved in it, because you have factors like prediction and classification involved, because how else does a computer make decisions, right? You got to do all those calculations. And a lot of these agents that emerged out of the lab came from her, I would say, like, her incapability to do certain things. So she herself was this individual who just routinely forgot names, dates, places, and locations. And she was like, we need help with all of these problems, you know?
Mm.
She was like, this is what machines are good at. And this is a direct quote where she says, for example, multitasking, keeping track of many, many things at once, or doing extensive searches and remembering things. A lot of my work has been about using these fairly simple agents, a little army of software entities to augment people's cognitive capabilities. So yeah, she quite literally built, I would say, the first bot army of sorts. And her agents did exactly that. So the first ever one that she built learned her meetings, her schedule, how she was not a morning person. And she ended up creating this scheduling agent. So while, she just went about her day, her calendar was filled up with patterns that mimicked what she was used to. I thought it was really cool, because that's how you need to look at the field of computer science itself. It's like you take something that's lacking and then you just build on top of it.
Yeah, how can this be helpful for me?
Exactly, yeah. And then it went into, because they were a part of a larger group, they wanted to do way more than that. So the software agents group, they started off doing emails for book suggestions. So it was like, if somebody in an email wrote out like, hey, I enjoyed this, and this. What else can I read? And then the agents just started learning stuff based off the content that was already available, and then started emailing and recommending other books that one might enjoy. And I think it
Okay.
was, I know, yeah. And then it was this recommendation aspect of the agents and the way that they were using their algorithms, that they went on to build a dynamic website or a dynamic browser version that would start recommending you music. HOMR, or Homer, at that time. It was not just any other website where you could just go up and be like, okay, hey, for example, in today's modern world, like, I like Olivia Rodrigo. What other artists would I enjoy? And rather just giving you a list, it would also kind of use, there's a concept called collaborative filtering, which I'll dive into more later. And it would give you an interesting new choice that you may have never heard of before. And it could be this absolute obscure indie artist as well. And that's what made this website stand out.
I was just thinking, it's like, it reminds me a lot of just the Spotify algorithm. That's
Exactly.
like, I get a lot of my music
Yeah,
recommendations from that.
exactly.
Yeah.
It was Spotify of the 90s, because I would say when you go onto the website, you're already providing it with enough information, like what you already like, what you enjoy listening to. And then it would use this very concept in order to build off of that. That was what made it very useful. Up until now, it was the fact that it was not that she discovered collaborative filtering. Collaborative filtering was already discovered by people before her. There was work getting done on it. But the way in which Patty used this concept opened up a lot more doors. Rather than having every possible case scenario programmed about every user's choice, which is what AI, or traditional AI, or knowledge based agents that they used to call it, was built off, collaborative filtering agents would rather fill in gaps of knowledge by learning from other agents. So, and the easiest modern day example of this is your Netflix, or even just your Spotify. They're looking at habits, or rather the patterns of the people around you. And these agents try to fill in the gaps of what's missing and what you may like, just based off of that. Now, we need to think that it's easy to think recommendation system and immediately set your mind to go to commerce, right? So you've got your Amazon, you've got your Netflix, you've got content being recommended or things being recommended to you. But it also meant that if you liked a movie or if you liked a song because your friend liked it, would it not be possible that if your friend also likes another person because of, similar characteristics, there might be a good chance that you might also be good friends with that person in like a modern day kind of like, hey, meet my friend, you guys share these interests.
Yeah.
I think around in 1995, Patty wrote this paper exploring this very concept. And the thing that I loved the most about it was that it was completely jargon free and it was clear language.
Mm.
She just wanted to make it as accessible as possible. And she said that we need technology to help us wade through all the information to find the items what we really want and need, and to get rid of the things that we do not want to be bothered with. So, this personalized gold mine that she was rather sitting on. And if you think about it, it's like you just have to feed it likes, dislikes, interests, your social circles, whatever you need
Yeah.
about yourself, and it would give you a personalized version that you would need. And that is what social media today is.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
today it is something they would like, I believe Facebook or Twitter, if you just went up to them and said, hey, here's everything about you, they would pay you for information like that. um
Yes.
but back then, however, they had a hard time convincing people that this was a viable business. And I think around that same time, they stuck to more on the e-commerce side of it rather than the social media aspect, even though that concept was very much still like a good possibility. They started building their own startup. And then they began something called Firefly. And there's this very interesting Wired article when Firefly reached its success, and I'll link that in the description. And it talks about the entirety of Patty's life and whatever Firefly has been up to. Mars is said saying that they had all these marriages that came out of Firefly. So what people did was take these concepts of agents and collaborative filtering and started building the craziest kind of technology that you can even imagine. So you've had these online music recommendation, and then it came into like another commerce venture, and then another venture, and it was all kind of based on the same concept, but it was just layered on top of one another. Firefly, however, even though it was a very solid use case of collaborative filtering and just recommendation system, it never took off because back then the advertising models were not built in like the kinds that support
Mm.
social media today, about how you have ads popping up and then you have the click per rate per click ratio and concepts like that. They were not present back then, and because of that they could never really make it into the big leagues. However, it did have, I think, a pretty good run. So some of the marketers were saying that the software agents that were developed by Firefly provided kind of like a holy grail to predict what customers are likely to want next. And that meant they
Yeah.
could reach them with a more customized pitch. And Firefly was able to strike deals with Barnes and Noble, Yahoo, and Rolling Stone. And it was just visionary because Mars had built these intelligent agents that could pretty much predict anything, that could suggest you anything. So yeah, obviously collaborative filtering from that point on, it wasn't a dead end. It's what leads Amazon to suggest you a product, or for Netflix to give you a movie, Spotify to generate your playlist. It's everywhere in today's world. But in 1998, Firefly eventually got purchased by Microsoft, and it wasn't surprisingly for the suggestion or the recommendation aspect of it, but it was because they had also developed a model or the concept of user ID in order to protect the individual's privacy. So they were also tackling
Okay.
issues of privacy and just personal IDs and stuff like that, and the model that they were built was so solid that Microsoft wanted to get that too, and they eventually got conquered then. But there are a lot of articles that I read and just a lot of discussion going on about how if Firefly probably just held tight and did not buy into the deal, they would actually be worth way more than what it was sold for back then. And that might probably explain why we've never heard about technologies like that,
For sure. Yeah, it's that thing of like in hindsight, it's like, oh, you could have like
You could have,
just
I know.
stuck it out a little more. You never know. You never know what's gonna happen. And if you're like probably not gonna go anywhere and I could make money off it now, then like it's such a tricky decision.
It is. But unfortunately, by 1999, Firefly, I think, as that startup venture, shut down. However, the research lab of it still continues till date. So we're still talking late 90s, right? And they had Homer come out sometime in the early 90s. By 1997, there was 6 degrees, which was another way people were recommending one another, or people were meeting other people online. So that was the earliest forms of social media. That was 97. And then you had MySpace.
Is that based on like the 6 degrees of separation idea?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I would.
Where it's like,
but yeah, 6 degrees is basically the whole meeting new friends concept.
Yeah, because it's that idea that like any random person on the world, you're connected to them in less than like 7 steps, I think.
Yeah, like you and Barack Obama could be related or somehow.
Yeah, you're connected by some mutual friends.
Yeah,
if you do 6 hops,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but so they got known around 97. Then you had MySpace, and then there was another website called Fenster. And then all of these websites were doing essentially the same thing, which is recommending new people to you, finding personalized ways to see who could be your next friend. And then eventually, 3 years later, a dude named Zuckerberg toyed around with the idea of social network called Face Smash. And then the rest, as we know, is history. But yeah, I thought it was very surprising that Pattie's name, despite her significant contributions, I would say, of course, we cannot completely dismiss the work Facebook and Zuckerberg and his team have done. But so much of it relies on the concepts that were strengthened by Pattie. And it is quite surprising that that name is not as well known as.
Yeah, no, I'd never heard of her.
But now we do, and now we know what a visionary she is. So
love that. Amazing.
Yeah. The thing is, even today, I think I was listening to some of her old TED Talks and just videos of her talking about things. And she was truly a pioneer in all things AI, because she was doing wearable tech, like smartwatches, way back then. And she was exploring these concepts of how your watch can provide you with information while you are at the grocery store. So she took that concept of useful tech and built brand ideas about it, which exist in today's world. So it makes me think she knew a lot of stuff before they could even have that possibility. And I love that little pattern with all of the women that we've covered so far, like all the way from Karen to Hedy Lamarr to Radia to even to Pattie today.
Yeah, for sure. I think that kind of like I don't know, I guess practical thinking, or like thinking about tech instead of just getting obsessed with like the technology itself, in terms of like the algorithms or whatever.
I agree.
It's like, what can this actually do for me? What can this do for society? I think that's the way to look at it.
Before I delve into collaborative filtering in the next section, I did also just catch up and read up on what is Pattie Maes up to these days. So she does still do a little bit of her inventing every now and then, but she leaves Firefly completely alone. She spends about 1 or 2 days there, and I think she sits majorly on the board. But she's also contemplating offers from Japanese cosmetics companies and Japanese electronics firm to appear in their television commercials, owing to her modeling history. Yep.
That's so funny. What a diverse lady.
Yeah, we, again, as I said, we do love a total all-rounder.
That's pretty excellent.
Yeah. All right. Obviously, I'm going to be delving into a bit more on collaborative filtering and building up on how does this help us or help recommendation systems. And I think
Yep.
the easiest way to understand it is basically how does Netflix know what it's recommending to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if you ever found yourself just questioning why does Amazon know that I need this product right now? Like, why is
Yes.
this scalp massager being recommended to me? Well, now you will. Most of the intelligent agents that Patty had created at that time, or whatever came out of MIT lab, use this concept, collaborative filtering.
Yeah.
So collaborative filtering, in like the simplest of terms, is using known information about a group of people and looking for the patterns within them in order to make recommendations. I kind of, when I was trying to learn this concept, I found it very similar to the way Katie Bauman was
Oh
making the
yeah.
predictions, or the disco ball analogy if that you used.
Mm-hmm.
So is we can kind of think of this problem to be a similar one, minus the use of telescopes, of course. So we can start out by understanding this problem by looking at people versus the things that they like. So movies, music as a matrix, right? So you've got rows for the number of people. Let's say 4 people. So they occupy row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4. And
Mm-hmm.
then we've got bunch of random movies. These may be movies that all these 4 people would have watched, or they haven't watched all of them, but just a random selection of movies, and they occupy the columns, right? So we've got a matrix to begin, and each cell represents a number for how much they liked or disliked it. So we can
Right.
say if
Okay.
the scale goes from like 0 to 5, then 0 would be this is absolutely trash. And then 4 is like, I will watch this. I will get like my friend to watch this. I'll get everybody to watch this, that kind. So that's the
Yep.
number that you would like put in the cell. So person 1 liked movie 1 a lot. So they get a 5. Person 2 has never seen movie 1. So you leave it as a blank cell. Obviously, not everybody in that list of people have watched all of these movies, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
would end up with some cells which are empty simply because they've never rated them and they've never seen them. So we don't know what that score would be. And what we're trying to do is to understand what could that empty cell be. There are 2 ways that you could approach this problem. One is called content based, and the other one is collaborative. Content based filtering is completely based on, literally, as the name goes, the content, or rather the features or the attributes of it. So, movies, as we know, sometimes they can be classified by their features. So, something like Transformers would be sci
Mm-hmm.
fi action, right? And
Yeah.
something like The Proposal would be romantic and comedy. So, that's what makes the features of a particular content. Now, you as an individual would have your personal preferences towards these contents. So, you're somebody that may enjoy sci fi, but you may also not enjoy action. So, you've got
Mm-hmm.
your own, I would say, scorecard against those features, right? Now, if we know that you liked, let's say you liked rom-coms, but you hate sci-fi, that in itself forms a score. So you'd have like a score of 4 for rom-coms and then 0 for like sci-fi. And then we'd
Mm-hmm.
know what a movie's score is. So suppose a movie is action and sci-fi, um, it would be rated 4 for action because it's like, yeah, that's how much the action there is, and then it would have 4 for sci-fi. To figure out whether you would like this movie or not, you simply multiply the 2 values that we've got, which is your personal score and the movie score. So if you've got
Right.
a
Okay.
0 towards action on, if you've got a 0 towards action and 0 towards sci-fi, which is basically the features of the movie, 0 multiplied with 0 is just going to yield you 0, right?
Yep.
And we do this for each of the movies or each of the features of the movies versus your own features, which, we're looking at like the scores just getting multiplied. And then you add up the entire score, and that lets you know the final score for the movie. And that's how you fill out the empty cell.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
This is content based, where we look at the movie, we look at what the content is, or the features of the content, and then we just figure out whether we're going to like it or not. It's a very arbitrary method. I would say the biggest problem with it is how limiting it is, because
Mm.
sometimes with the content that comes out today, it need not just be X or Y, right? Sometimes they're a mix of
Yeah.
like a new aspect of it. This limiting aspect of content-based filtering also meant that when it's recommending you, it might run out of concepts to recommend because there's only so many things that check these boxes. And
Yeah, that fit exactly in the
yeah,
existing categories that you've got. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And eventually there wouldn't be any diversity with the recommendations anymore. And surprisingly, a cool fact that I learned was the traditional version of Netflix used to do exactly this. What it required you as a new user was basically to fill out this huge list of genres and how much you liked them. And because it was
Yeah.
able to collect this data, it was then recommending you based on that. Now, if you're as a business, if you're expecting your before sign up your users to fill out 50 questions, it's just tedious, right?
Yeah, it's not a great business model.
Exactly, yeah. Collaborative filtering runs on the motive of you might like what your neighbor likes. The problem still remains the same, which is we're trying to fill out these empty cells of our matrix.
Yeah.
But instead of declaring the features and then multiplying to figure out what the number may be, we're going to go about this in reverse, in the sense of we're going to find out what is the mix and match of values of both the product as well as you as an individual that gives the result of the number that we see in the cell right now. And that's
Okay.
just
Yeah.
a bunch of guesswork, right? So it's like if the cell contains a number 4 against a movie that is romantic comedy, then your score might be 2 and the movie score might be 2. So 2 are 4. And then you kind of just do this guesswork and mix and match of values until all parts of the cells are filled. The easiest way I like to think of this is kind of like playing Sudoku. If you've played Sudoku,
Yeah.
yeah, which is just, trying to fill in the box in order to fit the rules of that
Yes.
box.
You know what it has to be, but you don't know the exact configuration it'll be in, so you just try things and yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Obviously, manual effort was not used here because you can sit here all day with
Yes.
the
Come up with
combinations.
options.
Exactly. So that's where machine learning algorithms or, the kind of prediction algorithms came into place. There's just so many ways that I feel like you can go about handling this. But the essence of it remains the same, which is the reversal way in which we tackle the problem. And what this also means is we're not outright labeling the features, like we're not calling it black or white. These are features that evolve out of what we learn about the users. And that's why they're also known as latent features, because they're not human defined. They're just these underlying aspects that has emerged as a result of our guesswork.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
yeah, and that's how you begin to discover things that you didn't even know you liked. Like that's how you know that, sometimes you like to listen to sad songs that also have like a hint of hip hop in them or something like that.
Yep.
So yeah, but you would still have the risk with collaborative filtering of not having enough data to help you do these
Mm.
predictions. And sometimes, what if you are just this random individual with zero patterns, right? Like you're watching all over the place, it can still throw it a little off. But I think collaborative filtering as a model as such still works much better than content based, because it's still using recognizable patterns. It's starting to understand how people are working in like a similar group, and then recommends you things that would be useful eventually. And it's worked out so far. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It does make a lot of sense of like why you get recommended the things that you do, because sometimes I'm like, why is this on my recommended? But then
Yeah.
it's
It's because
like,
somebody in the next below you to the matrix probably matches the
yes.
value. Yeah.
Yeah.
The coolest application I thought, and I'll dive into like a lot more applications from this, but I thought one of the coolest things in this video that I was watching was the fact that apparently the kind of recommendations, because we're always thinking of recommendations in a very, I would say, commercial angle. So movies, musics, books, products. But this kind of recommendation goes into a concept called synthetic control. And it's a concept where countries, or rather the policy and the governing bodies of certain countries, they use this in order to study the impact of how a particular policy or a rule could affect your nation or your group of people, by studying how it has already affected the other nations that have implemented this. So concepts like gun control, anything that you want to study about, if you want to assess how is it going to affect this particular group of people or this set of people, you just have to study the neighboring countries with similar features or how their features are taken into, and then you kind of build your own model and could get a guesstimation of how the public may perceive the implementation of this policy.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's a lot of very useful stuff from like one seemingly simple algorithm. But yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So now that we have a good idea about how collaborative filtering works, we kind of can guess on what the applications are, if it wasn't obvious already. And if I haven't already said it for 50 times, it's recommendation systems, guys. Like, yeah, that's it. But I thought it might be cool to talk about how Pattie herself and the lab has taken collaborative filtering and the different products that they have come up with. So they've got Firefly at like as this e-commerce venture. So they've got multiple systems and multiple agents working on different applications, just using collaborative filtering at some level of it. So one of the lab projects that could have direct applications is called Yenta, which is an agent-based personal introduction service. And one of the research, it was developed by one of the research assistants in Mars's agents group called Leonard Fournier. And what it does is a user's Yenta talks to other Yentas and then picks a possible partner who has similar interests. So you're literally letting robots talk to one another and be like, yeah, okay. You could be
They're like
mine.
robot wingman. They're like,
Yes, robot wingmen.
my person's into this thing, your person's into that thing. Let's get them
Let's
together.
get them two together. Yeah, exactly. One of this other invention, and I thought this was a whole funny story, was the fact that she used her agents in a real world situation in setting up an elaborate electronic marketplace called Kasba. And it was this Media Lab agent extravaganza. So they had 200 symposium attendees, and they were given a bag of goods and fake money. And they also had agents that could be instructed to buy and sell. So they had people with fake money, but then they had agents doing these, right? But then a lot of people went wild, and Mars recalls that some of the participants really should have been thrown in jail. They promised to buy certain things when they did not even have the money. But they had agents doing all of these things. And then a whole black
Yeah.
market emerged out of it. Most of the Japanese sponsors skipped the symposium and haggled instead. And Mars and some colleagues then just eventually ended up implementing a permanent system called MIT Marketplace, in which people can electronically buy and sell CDs and books and other small items via software agents. The agents, I would think the agents were fine in this, but it's when the people get involved, that's when it gets really messy.
I mean, I feel like that's always the story, right? It's like the
Yeah,
technology by
exactly.
itself isn't bad. It's just that people are terrible.
Yeah. But, it might also just lead you to think that eventually how one can manipulate agents to start doing these under the table deals that may not exactly be illegal, but if you train something bad enough, it might just become as bad. But yeah, I think that those were some of the few, and I have been like, I could go on a lot more on what Firefly is up to, but just in the interest of time, I will put that in the description so people can just read about the different kinds of products that they're developing. There's some ventures on wearable tech. Lots of stuff that it would just be very, very relevant in today's world. So yeah, that was about Pattie Maes and her work on making software agents, I would say, a household name and possibly paving the way for intelligent recommendation systems today.
Yeah, that's really cool. I feel like I'm amazed at that, and I'm thankful that that technology was developed, but I'm also kind of like, this is what is keeping me on the internet forever. Like, it's the like
Yeah.
recommendation algorithms are both like amazing because you find so much good stuff, but then it's also like,
Yeah,
but now
this
I'm
is
like sucked
why,
into a
yep, this is why I've spent 2 hours today morning instead of actually doing something. I've just been on my phone.
yes. Exactly. And it's like that
Yeah.
that meme of like my algorithm knows me better than I know myself. Like
Exactly. Yeah. Now
it's
they're
it's
too
gotten
good.
too advanced.
It's too advanced now. Yeah. The other aspect that I really wanted to point out was when I was reading about how Patty came up with just the concept of Homer, right? She called it an advanced version of the word of mouth algorithm, which
Mm.
I don't know if you remember was the driving algorithm behind Karen's as well, TFIDF. I just feel like, they all go hand in hand with one another, just one paving the
Yeah.
way to the next one, which even more emphasizes the fact of why we need the community that you spoke about at the beginning of, yeah, the episode with the rule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just unlocks such a whole new world of ideas and,
Yeah.
like sharing. I was at a wedding this weekend and they were talking
Mhm.
about how this idea of like 1 + 1 can equal more than two. Like
Yeah,
two people working together can be more than the individual outputs added together.
of course.
Um,
Yeah.
which I thought was cool. And it's obviously like a lovely thought for marriage, but it's also like a really pertinent idea for work and for building new technologies. And it's like our combined efforts can be so much more than even our individual efforts all added together.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, everyone. We really hope you liked that episode on Patty, and let us know if you've ever done anything with software agents that might have made
Mm,
your life easier. Because I kind of
mm.
want to build something now, because I want to go back and like tell maybe like a recipe recommendation or something, because I've always wondering what to cook for
Yeah.
dinner.
Oh, that's true. I'm so bad at that. It's like every week I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
this is my battle. This is my battle for this week to
Yeah, and
decide
it's
what
so
to eat again.
accessible. Yeah, it's so accessible and easy these days because of like you can just use the API from ChatGPT and start getting it to
Yeah.
start recommending
Yeah.
you things.
It's like every tech startup now is just like a shell on the OpenAI
Yes.
like engine. It's
Yeah,
like
for sure.
one thing, I don't know if this is to add, but just like an anecdote. I had a friend who I was catching up with a couple of years ago, and he was saying that he's also like a data analyst at a company, and he was saying that he had finished all his work, so he built a it sounded like a very schmancy office because they had someone who would basically come in and like do massages.
Oh,
And
wow.
you could like on like one day a week and you could like book in a little slot and get like a massage. I'm like, I want a massage in the office. But
Yeah.
he basically built like a software agent that as soon as the bookings opened, it automatically booked him into a slot so that he didn't
Oh.
miss.
I think I
because
want
it
to,
would like book out.
yeah. I think I want to do one of that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought that was quite
That's a
funny.
that's a good application of it. Wow.
I don't know if
Okay.
it's quite the same thing, but it made me think of it
I
like
mean,
the,
isn't it?
getting
I think it's
computers
the
to do
same
stuff
as,
for you.
yeah, I think it's the same as Patty's
The
scheduling
scheduling one.
agent. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and we hope to see you next week with another new episode by Beth. Yay.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And yeah, thank you so much for the support, everyone. I'm just looking at our analytics, and we've actually just crossed over the 250 downloads line, which is
Ooh.
super exciting. So super thankful to everyone who's listened so far. Feel free to keep sharing the podcast. Tell us what your favorite episodes were. You can email us at Bite Club. Is it just Bite Club Podcast at gmail.com?
Yeah, it's Bite Club Podcast. Yeah.
Bite Club Podcast at gmail.com. Yeah, haven't plugged that in a while. So if you have any like episode suggestions or questions or corrections, if we said something wrong, let us know. And yeah, follow us on social media. Thanks for hanging around.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. See you next time. Bye.
See you guys. Bye.